Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to another of the videos where I compare a expensive original Swiss watch to a much more economically viable looky-likey. But today, no Rolex, no Omega, not a Pagani in sight either. It's Doxa versus Tactical Frog. Yes, indeed, not the last time you'll be hearing the crickets today, folks. A few interesting decisions being made over the course of the production of this one, that's for sure. It seems that somebody in the East has got hold of the Doxa catalogue recently because there's been a spate of these Doxa lookalikes. I picked up the Tactical Frog back in August. I paid $179 US for this one. Since then, Seestern, so close, one letter away there. Seestern have released one which I think, to all intents and purposes, is identical for a very similar amount of money. I was even pointed in the direction of a MARANEZ SAMUI for just under $500. Who are they kidding? I'm betting all three of those watches come out of the same factory. I'll leave links to all three of those watches in the description of the video and also the Doxa. It's an interesting comparison between these two watches today because of the relative costs. With the Rolex, the Pagani cost 1% of the original. With the Omega, the Pagani cost 2% of the original. Today with the Doxa, the Tactical Frog costs 10% of the original. How close does it get to the Doxa? Is there an argument for saving up for the Doxa? Does the Doxa justify its price? And most of all, what does it all mean anyway? Let's flip the camera and find out. Yes, indeed, Tactical Frog on the left, Doxa on the right. I don't think I needed to point that out, though clearly, like I said, somebody has got a hold of the Doxa catalogue. They are very, very similar in a number of regards. They even brand the Tactical Frog as a 300T rather cheekily. So I bought this one myself as discussed. Where did I get the Doxa from? Well, from none other than Mr. X, who just loves Doxa. I mean, he really loves Doxa. So an 1800T, a 1200T, a 300T, and he even has the limited edition 300 Shark Hunter carbon fibre as well. That's some love. I'll bring back the 1200T a bit later on for a lume comparison, but I'm going to focus on the similarities and the differences between these two in 5 areas to give this video a bit of structure. The first is case, the second is bracelet, the third is the movement, the fourth the dial and hands, and the fifth is the lume as discussed. But let's do the basics, the dimensions and specifications of each before we start. Though I appreciate they may end up being rather similar. 43mm in diameter, 12.8mm thick with a Tactical Frog, 44mm lug to lug, 20mm lug width, now tapering down to 18 and back up to 19.5 at the clasp. Sized up for me, this one weighs in at bang on 150 grams. The Doxa, however, is noticeably heavier, 20% heavier, coming in at 180 grams. It does have the same diameter dimension, perhaps unsurprisingly, at 43, 1mm thicker at 13.8, 44mm lug tip to lug tip, just the same as the Tactical Frog, 20mm lugs, but it flares, the bracelet flares out from the case. You tell me what you think of that in the comments. I'll give you my thoughts a bit later on. It narrows back down to 20, back up to 21.5 at the clasp. Both watches are made of 316L stainless steel, both feature sapphire crystals, flat on the Doxa, domed on the Frog. Both have screw down crowns, but the water resistance ratings are a little bit different. 200 meters for the Frog, 1200 meters for the Doxa. Stainless steel bracelets with solid end links, push pins on the Frog, screw links on the Doxa. Frog has a basic clasp, it's one of those cheapo 18mm ones. 3 levels of micro adjust pressed on the upper, milled underneath. The Doxa has a much more comprehensive dive style clasp, fully milled and diver's extension / micro adjust included. Case finish not massively different between the two watches though. High polished side and a circular brush on the upper surface of that classic kind of cushion shape. Recessed crowns, kind of semi-guarded crown. It's a similar size. It's about 7mm on both watches. There's the little frog on the crown of this one. It is just printed on though. You can feel it there. That will scratch off, I'm sure, given time. Nice brushed surface to that upper bezel. I'll come back to the bezel a bit later though. And as intimated, the Doxa is very similar to the frog. If you're going to copy a watch, then you may as well copy it properly. So high polished sides, circular brush there, semi-recessed crown with the Doxa kind of fish logo on there. Mixed finish on the bezel though. There's a circular brush to the inner ring and a high polished outer ring. There is, however, a massive gulf in quality between the bracelets on the two watches. Let's start with the Doxa. As you might expect, given the massive gulf between the prices of the two watches, a 10x. This one is a proper 7-link beads of rice, and all of those center links are separate pieces of metal. You've got a much better articulation than you do on the frog. Really nicely finished, high polished upper, very, very smooth. Outer edges are brushed and high polished edges to the whole bracelet. The links are thick and chunky, screw links as mentioned, and it is a proper thick and chunky diver's tool class for a watch that is a proper diver's tool. Milled throughout, very, very chunky in operation, and that diver's extension definitely means you can take this one into the water on the weekends. Doxa brand name embossed there, and the Doxa fish pushed through. Now, no micro adjust though, so you are going to be using that as your micro adjust, but that is also milled, and yeah, the whole thing feels nicely robust. The one on the frog is very nice for a $180 watch. It has that beads of rice look, high polish in the middle, it's nice and smooth as well. You've got those brushed edges, but the links are much thinner. It's only push pins as noted. Maybe that's where some of the weight saving is as well, the 30 grams difference between the watches. And if you look on the underside, they aren't actually individual links, so this is only a 3-link bracelet masquerading as a 7-link bracelet. On to movements now. Doxa don't state it explicitly, but they use the ETA 2824 in the 300T. 25 jewel hacking and hand winding Swiss made auto with a 38-hour power reserve. Mr. X does beat his watches around a little bit, so yeah, I'm never quite sure what I'm getting. Healthy amplitude of this one, yeah, that's running okay. It is just a base grade though. I believe they used a custom rotor, but it's not a top grade or an elaborate grade or anything. $2,000, it might have been nice to have gone a little bit more premium, but there you go. Shock horror, the tactical frog uses a Seiko NH35. They may be as dull as dishwater and absolutely everywhere, but there's a reason for it. Check that time grapher result. Arguably better than the ETA in the Doxa. 24 jewel hacking and hand winding, again roughly 40-hour power reserve. 21,600 vibrations per hour though. You can hear it only ticks 6 times per second rather than 8, so not quite as smooth, but yeah, not bad for the money. On to the dial and hands, starting with the Doxa, and I must admit, I love the way these watches look, and I love the colours that Doxa use as well. This pastel blue is fantastic. I love the orange, I love the yellow, I love their purple ones. I think they're such fun and cheery watches. Just a printed dial here though. The tactical frog, as you'll see, actually uses applied indices, and that does have a bearing on the loom. A bit of a cheap out, I think, for a $2,000 watch by Doxa, but there you are. It has that classic 70s, late 60s pattern though, so the indices are printed to look like they are beveled and kind of in 3 sections, if you see what I mean. Large ones at the 12, the 6 and the 9, and smaller ones everywhere else. There is a beveled and framed date window at the 3 o'clock, printed minute track around the outer edges, and it's almost like a sector dial. There's lines drawn in from the major indices heading towards the pinion. I also love the asymmetric logo placement, the kind of Doxa and automatic up there between 10 and 11, and sub 300T aquamarine down there between 3 and 4. Swiss made either side of that printed index at 6. Now the handset, again a little unusual but very much a Doxa signature. The minute hand, being a dive watch, is the one that you're focusing on, so it is disproportionately large compared to that little stumpy hour hand. It's always like one of those crabs that has one really big claw and one really small claw. The second hand is also in high gloss black and has a rather square paddle tip. That bicolor bezel insert that I highlighted earlier on, 120 click unidirectional. It is recessed and then paint filled, and they've used 2 different types of paint. There's black paint on that. 0 to 55 inner ring, the minute markers if you will, whereas they've used blue paint on that outer ring, the depth gauge if you will. Again, I think it is a very, very nice effect. Moving on to the Tactical Frog, again no surprises, it looks pretty similar, but as discussed the indices are applied, again in kind of 3 parts with the loom center section and sloping edges. Brand logo, brand name, divers 200 meters with an apostrophe, which is of course a total lie because this is not ISO rated, and automatic, all just printed on. I don't mind the frog, to be honest. I think it looks pretty good. It's a kind of quirky color to this one, so why not have a quirky name? And I did review a bomb frog a couple of years ago, so I can't really complain too much about a Tactical Frog. Again, it's a black handset here with that disproportionately large minute hand. Minute hand doesn't have quite as much loom. The loom doesn't extend as far down towards the pinion as it does on the Doxa. Similarly, there are no sectors pointing in towards the pinion from the 12 and the 6 like there were on the Doxa. Also no bevel edge to the date window at the 3 o'clock. So it does have applied indices, but it does lose a couple of niceties as well, and it loses that classic asymmetry that the Doxa has, which I think is a bit of a miss. But the biggest miss of this entire watch is the bezel. Again, it is 120 click and the action is fantastic. However, it is a tachymetre bezel. I mean, what the actual fuck were they thinking with this one? They weren't thinking, that's my guess anyway. Now on the Doxa, the 2 sections of the bezel move in unison, so you can actually time a dive. On the Tactical Frog, however, only the tachymeter actually moves, so that minute scale is fixed, meaning it's a dive watch that you cannot time a dive. Complete fail there. Moving on to our 5th and final category then, the loom. Now what's going on here, I did say I would bring back the T1200 because it has the same colour tone of loom as the Tactical Frog. So there we are then, the T1200 is on the left, the T300 in the middle and the Tactical Frog on the right. Initially they're all pretty good. When I crank up the speed though, you'll see what I mean. Both of the Doxas have printed indices, whereas the Tactical Frog has applied indices. I think that tends to balance it out a little bit. But to be honest, as we get to the end of the 20 minutes, both watches featuring C3, left and right, are pretty much gone. It's the BGW9 in the middle that's hanging on in there. Nobody covers themselves in glory here, but then nobody covers themselves in muck either. And it's the same when we get both watches on wrist. No muck, but no glory from either, I'm afraid. You certainly notice the extra 20%, the extra 30 grams from the Doxa. It feels like a much heavier, much more robust watch on wrist, and I believe it is. Better build quality overall, it's a little bit thicker, and a much chunkier bracelet. However, that just looks really, really awkward. The wings here, the flare out, and the fact that it doesn't sit nicely at all, exposing those upper ends. No problem, Jody, there's a rubber strap available from Doxa. Yes, there is, but it's 750 Australian dollars. That's well over 500 US dollars. No thanks. Now, Mr. X has certainly got more money than I do, but he would have to have more money than sense to option on one of those things. The cushion case of the Frog wears just as comfortably as the Doxa. Overall, noticeably lighter as well, given that 30 grams difference. The bracelet, well, it's alright as I said for the money, but again it's got that slightly awkward first link, just not quite enough articulation there, or they haven't sized that first link, they haven't profiled it quite right, unfortunately. And outside in natural light you can see that they've used a very prominent bluey purple anti-reflective coating on the Tactical Frog, and they've gone a bit overboard with it. From some angles, all you see is the anti-reflective undercoating. From others, you can see a nice, crisp, clean view of the dial. But yeah, I think it's a little bit overcooked. That's it on wrist outside. Yeah, it wears very nicely, compact lug to lug, and nicely balanced at 150 grams. Flat sapphire and clear AR on the Doxa means you don't get that blue-purple glow at all. Still pretty legible, black hands against that pale blue dial. Very, very nice indeed. On wrist it's the same, compact lug to lug, and it doesn't really feel all that much thicker, noticeably heavier though, and yeah, that bracelet a little bit awkward. So where does that leave us then? How am I going to wrap this video up in a nice and neat bow? What do I think of these two watches individually? And what do I think about the price difference between them? Is there indeed an argument for saving up for the real thing rather than buying a blatant rip-off like the Tactical Frog? So the Tactical Frog then, actually very impressive for $179. Given the movement, given the quality of finish, the nice piece of sapphire, the attention to detail paid on the dial and hands, and the decent bracelet. However, the fail with the bezel is unforgivable, I think. Maybe have a look at one of the Seesterns. They're basically the same from what I can tell, and they don't have that massive failure by putting a tachymetre bezel on a dive watch that you can't actually use at all. That's a bit of a shame. Look, if the tachymetre thing isn't a problem for you, then I think it's a good value, nicely made, and it's a fun, colourful summer watch. You can add one in orange or turquoise or yellow or something to your personal collection without breaking the bank. The Doxa, on the other hand, at $2,000, whilst not breaking the bank, is certainly more expensive than the Tactical Frog, but then again, you are buying the real deal and not just a blatant rip-off. In terms of the little details, the little touches, though, I'm not sure it justifies the price increase over the Tactical Frog. I mean, you're getting a Swiss movement and you're getting a much more solid feeling watch overall, but you're also getting a printed dial rather than applied indices. The loom isn't all that auspicious. Overall, it doesn't feel like a 10x over the Tactical Frog. The Doxas I've seen tend to be overpriced. I don't really see the value in them new. However, I do see the value in them used. Let someone else pay $2,000 for this. Let someone else pay $500 for a rubber strap if they're mad enough to. Then you buy it for maybe $1,200. I think at that price, with those margins between the two watches, for once there is actually an argument for saving up for the real thing. So there you have it, Doxa versus Tactical Frog indeed. If you like this comparison between cheap and expensive, why not check out the two previous ones that I've referred to, Rolex Explorer 2s and Omega Aquaterras. Thanks for watching, I'll see you all soon.